password?
Password? I'm just here for the beer.
Okay.
It's been a day. Can I get a craft beer, please? Hey, how do you showcase your seasonal beers? Amazing! How about labels? I can't get them to stick. All right, how do you stand out amongst 3,000 different breweries? Holy sh**!
Thank you, Samin. Hi, I'm Jordan Kitagawa. You may recognize me from that goofy video. Similarly to Rochelle, who introduced our last speaker, I'm a packaging specialist at the Great Little Box Company, who also moonlights as an amateur actress for packaging company informational videos. And like Rochelle mentioned, there'll be a few of us from Great Little Box floating around BC BeerCon over the next few days. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions about packaging, labels, corrugated boxes, folding carton boxes, shipping supplies. We can help you with it all. I'd now like to take this opportunity to introduce our next speaker, Ren Navarro. Ren began her company, Beer Period, Diversity Period, in 2018 after nearly a decade working inside the Canadian craft beer industry. And like the name of her company suggests, she is here to educate, enlighten, and engage as she talks about beer, period, and diversity, period. She's going to talk today about attracting, engaging, and retaining a diverse crowd of people into all levels of your business. She's given talks on diversity and inclusion at several colleges and countless festivals, panels, radio shows, and podcasts throughout North America. In addition to being a diversity educator, she's a craft beer consultant for bars and restaurants in Ontario, and an educator for countless businesses throughout the country. Please join me in welcoming Ren Navarro, and a big thank you from myself and my team at the Great Little Box Company for joining us here today. It's a little early for a beer, but with my coffee, cheers to everyone, and hope to see you more in 2021. Over to you, Ren.
Thanks, Jordan. Hi, friends. This is such an honor to be here to do the keynote talking about brewing up real change. And who doesn't love a good pun? So, I mean, hey, we're all here about beer. But the big buzzwords of 2020 especially were diversity and inclusion. But according to Merriam-Webster, I'm going to look down for this, the definition of diversity is the condition of having or being composed of differing elements, variety, or an instance of being composed of differing elements or qualities, an instance of being diverse in terms of a diversity of opinion. So let's focus on that first definition. It's differing elements, but last year, based on what happened with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, breweries just talked about Black people. We were it. We were the diversity that you wished for. But according to Merriam-Webster, that is not diversity because it is not a differing group. One group of people. So what we need to really think about is what is diversity, and not just defining it in terms of the general, but defining it in terms of what your brewery needs, or what your bar or your restaurant or one of the places that just works. So you're in different spots within Canada, which means that your diversity will not be the same. But let's talk about what it could be. So BIPOC. So that is Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQ plus community, which I will get to after, people with disabilities, a much ignored portion of our population, and then people over the age of 45. Hello. were not thought about when it comes to craft beer. And I'm talking about craft beer because that's what we're all here for, but this can apply to big beer, it can apply to wine, it can apply to spirits, it can apply to life insurance. What we need to figure out is what for each of us that diversity is. So if you're in a spot where you have next to no Black community, then that's not the community that you want for part of your diversity. I'm not going to magically drop out of the air and land in your restaurant or your brewery and say, hey, I want to work here and I want to drink here. That's not how it works. If you are surrounded by a large Indigenous community or an East Indian or a West Indian or an Asian community, that's part of what you're going to look at. But again, one group is not diversity. So start looking, who's around me? Who am I not listening to? Who have I forgotten about? Because quite often when I do these talks, people always say, oh, well, we don't have a large Black community. Great. Do you have women? Because I hear women love to be everywhere in the world. It sounds flippant, but it's amazing at how we get stuck in these moments where we say, okay, this is the piece that I have to pay attention to. So when the George Floyd video came out last year, it was about Black lives, and Black lives matter every day, because all lives cannot matter until Black lives matter. That is one piece that we have to apply to. But by getting so focused on what we were doing and looking at one group of people, we ignored everyone else. And if we talk about diversity, you also have to think of the question of inclusion. We always say diversity and inclusion, they're best friends, they go everywhere together. No, they don't. There's many stories of people in breweries where there is diversity, but they don't feel included. So those are things that you've got to think about. Just because you want the diversity, do they feel like they should be there? Do they feel like they want to be there? Because that is always a big piece. So if you don't want to look at it as just having included diversity, think of it as, how do you make people feel welcome anyway? And how do they feel like they're part of something? Because that's what you do with your customer base. You're obviously doing something that people come back. Because if they hated it, you wouldn't have a brewery. And if you did, you'd be very lucky. So what I want to focus on is 3 points. And they're not crazy points. They're nice and simple. So you want to get some diversity. You want to get some more customers in general. Think of it this way. Who are the people outside of your door? Because you're already saying, we're super friendly. We're very accepting. We're welcoming. We're a safe space. The people who don't know you exist don't know that you're a welcoming space. They don't know it's safe. They don't know that they can come in. They don't know that you've got a great product. So how do you get those people who are outside of your theoretical building? Social media. Everyone's on social media. We're in the middle of a pandemic. I shudder to look at how much time I spend on my phone now. So what are you posting about? How are you posting about it? Are you just posting beer? Because if you're just posting beer, great, you're a brewery. We know you make beer. What's different? Almost every brewery out there makes a great lager, but is it just about the lager? No. So when you're putting it out there and you're trying to get these people who don't know you exist to know you exist, what are you saying? How do you say it? Who are in your photos? Are you showing nothing but a sea of whiteness just with a beer, or are you just showing beers? You're not showing the reflection of other people. And this is where you may say, but Ren, I live in a spot where I don't have a huge group of diversity. How do I suddenly show it? There are makers out there. There are BIPOC makers. There are LGBTQ plus makers. There are people with disabilities who are making things, and they're running social media campaigns. They can be hired. They can be coming in to help you figure out how to show a difference and show that you're welcome. Stock photos are a thing too. I mean, don't rely on them fully because you want to show you as your true self. So even if you can't do that, are you welcoming to the LGBTQ plus community? Are you showing something on a window, so like a sticker? Are you showing that breastfeeding mothers can come here? In Ontario, there are stickers that can be placed on windows. Please check for where you are in the world or in Canada. But that's these two little things can be placed somewhere. What are your values? Have you stated them? It's a big thing to say, this is who we are and this is what we believe in. We believe we're going to do these things and make you have a safe space, but we also ask that if you come into our safe space, that you adhere and have some of these same values. So putting that out there and getting your fans on social media to talk about you means that someone who isn't seeing you will see you. I mean, a lot of beer drinkers have friends who are not too sure about craft beer, and somehow we win them over. That's what the social media is going to be for. So you've convinced this person and you've said, hey, our door is open and we're going to provide a safe space. Come on in. The first thing you are not showing them that you don't have to show them is your beer, your brewery, your bar. We all know, we know that you've got beer and we know it's going to be great. What you want from them is to come in and feel welcome, just like anyone else. If I come in and I see that there's a rainbow sticker on the window, that is you saying that you are accountable to making sure that I feel welcome. If I am a person with a disability, can I physically get into your building? This is a piece that we forget about quite often. People who are using walkers, those with invisible disabilities, those using wheelchairs, how do they get in? Do you have a ramp? Is there something where you can press the door? Is it, hey, we're still working on it, but call us and we're going to get you in the building? Anything like that that shows that you are trying to make that move to make this place welcoming. So they're in, they're hanging out. How do you talk to people? How are you saying welcome? And these are, I mean, some of these things, you know, you might think, well, yeah, it's customer service, but we forget. We speak to people in beer who know beer differently from people who don't know it. It's very, you know, someone walks in and you've seen them all the time. You're like, hey, I've got this new milkshake IPA for you, try it out. And someone new walks in and you kind of say, how did you find out about us? And suddenly you shift. You want to find that in-betweener. You want to find the piece that says, hey, I haven't seen you around before, but thank you for coming in and choosing us. How did you find out about us? Here's what we're about. Here's our origin story if you've got enough time. And make your origin story not about, I opened a brewery in hopes of brewing the best beer. I opened the beer because, you know, I opened this brewery because it turned out that 3 generations ago, my great-great-great-grandmother was a brewster. And we found her recipes and I realized that there was this connection to it through this. And I opened a brewery because I wanted to give back to the community and I wanted to be part of the community. Origin stories should be sexier than they are. So it's not just about that. And I say sexy, I really mean that grabs you. It's not just, I went to school, I got a chance, I did this. The breweries that stick out in your mind are the ones that say, we did this as a family. We did this because it was the ability to express myself. And not just to express myself in this medium, but also to give back to a community that I always promised I would. And those are the stories that you want to tell people who are discovering you. Heck, those are the stories you want to tell people who already know about you and who have known about you for years. An origin story is more important than you think because it isn't just about preaching to your internal choir. It's about winning people over with those beautiful sounds that they can actually understand and that relay back to them. Right. So let's think about it. Where do you go shopping when you could go shopping? Or if you're in a province where you can go out, you're so lucky. Where do you go shopping? Where do you go as a creature of habit? You go to the places that make you feel comfortable and the places where you feel reflected, right? So, I mean, I'm lazy, so I shop at Old Navy. But part of why I stay, even though it's a big evil box empire, is because when I go in, there are pictures of people who look like me. It's a small thing, but it is so massive that every time I go in, the pictures will always change, but there will always be at least 2 people where I say, oh, okay, cool, I get it. And that's what you want. You want to have that moment where someone hears your story and says, huh, sounds kind of similar to mine. Because it doesn't have to be that I see me, but I want to see my story. I want to see a nugget that I'm like, there it is. That's the piece I connect to. Because it's so important to make these real connections. We talk about the craft brewery community, and community is one of those words that gets thrown around a heck of a lot now. But what does the community mean to you? So sit with that while I talk about this and think, what does community mean? And how is it that you have grown your current community? Because, you know, people can always move in and people can move out. So we're getting people moving in. So they're in, and you have done this creation of new people within that community. They're coming back. They've been part of this new beer thing, and they love it, and they tell their friends about it. Because that's the other thing. When someone starts to love your product, they become your brand ambassador, right? So how many, you know, I mean, think about it. How many band shirts do you have? How many shirts for other breweries do you have? You wear them because you believe in what they do. If they did something terrible, you'd be like, I gotta get rid of this sweater. I gotta get rid of this t-shirt. So when you put it on, that is you saying, I'm okay with this. And I believe in what I'm wearing. I don't work for them. I'm not part of it, but they're doing something that I think is a-okay. And that's what you want, right? So when you get these new people in and they're starting to really like, yeah, they bought everything. They're there all the time. They know all of you on a first name basis. Maybe they'll want to work for you. And part of that question is, how are you doing your job postings? How do you present these things to people? Because we get these points where we're very in our heads, right? So we all talk in jargon to each other and we talk in these short forms, and there's the language of beer, right? You can talk in ABVs and gravities and OGs and FEs and these and these and these and these, but someone outside of that, it's Greek to them. So when it comes time for you to welcome them into the family and you say, you know what, I want you to apply for this job, and you do your job posting, how have you written it? So for me, it's been a long time in beer, but the first time I went to apply for a sales rep job, I almost didn't do it because they were asking for 4 years of beer experience. And at the time I had 1 year, just 1 year selling in a retail store. However, I had over 20 years of customer service experience in offices, life insurance and credit card services, had worked my way up through management, 20 years. And I didn't think I could apply for that sales job because I only had 4 years of beer experience. Think about it. I'd probably not be here sitting talking to all of you right now if I didn't say, you know what, I'm just going to try. I got to get out of this job. I'm going to try. So it sounds silly, but to me, the 20 years of customer service experience didn't translate into the beer experience. And of course I showed up and they were like, well, selling beer is about being a good customer service person. So what is it that you really need? And yes, if you're looking for a brewer, you're going to be specific because I don't think you want me showing up. I kind of know what this button does. And this one, I'm not sure. And the one that you always say not to push, I really want to push it. But if you're talking tap room or you're talking delivery people or you're talking sales reps, what are the soft skills that you want someone to possess? Because you can teach anyone what a lager, an IPA, or a stout is. You can teach anyone what a milkshake IPA is, but you can't always teach people how to be nice and approachable and work well with others. And so when you are using jargon, you are getting rid of a very large group of people who are bringing things, diversity, different backgrounds, amazing knowledge that you may not have even known was something you should have known. So think about that. Think about how you present it. Think of how you approach it. And so let's say you figured this out and you've said, okay, I've got this great post and I've hired someone who is from a different background. Now what do I do with them? Well, you don't just leave them, right? So you become diverse in whatever way that is. So Black, Indigenous, person of color, person with a disability, someone over the age of 45, LGBTQ+, whatever else may make up that umbrella. How do you keep them? Because you need to make sure that they feel included. So there's a lot of different things. And this isn't just always coming up to them and being like, you feeling okay? You good? You good? Okay, cool. Because you don't do that with your regular staff. And if you do, okay, cool. But think about it. Think of how you would want them to move through the company. Think of how you want them to give to the community. And also think of how you want to help them grow. If you just leave them, you never check in and you never make sure that things are good, you're going to lose that diversity. Many brewers have been in that position where they've said, we don't really know what we did, but we've lost a lot of diversity. And usually I can guess with how often did you talk to that staff member? It's not about coddling people, but it's about making sure that we all have access to the information that we need, access to understanding, and a place to be able to ask questions and a safe space, because we're never on an equal playing field. If I showed up with an identical resume of a white man, sorry guys, I'm using you as an example this morning, but think of we can walk in, identical resumes. So we've put them in, someone looks at them, they're both great, bring them in, I want to talk to them. The second they see me, their words are going to change, or there might be a little bit of cloud on their face. He's going to be okay. Trust me, he's going to be okay. On paper, we're equal. In person, that's when it changes. And as Salmon was talking about, and we'll talk about in her workshop later on, there's that bias, right? We've just got it. It just happens. So remember, get the line even playing ground out of your head. That the level playing field, even playing ground, whatever you want to call it. On paper, we can be equal. In person, it's a very different concept. And so now you have to think that if we're both identical on paper, and now there is a difference in person, how do you get it that I'm going to be able to catch up? Because what happens is we leave it. We think in our mind that everyone moves this way. It's not how it works. So start thinking about how you want to get people engaged. Think of how you want to get your staff engaged. Think of how you want the people who are just in your building or drinking your product engaged. And when you break it down to those threes, it makes it a little easier to kind of ingest. Because as humans, we're always like, got to fix the problem. We got to do this. It's got to be better. The problem is humans. We're people. It's like herding cats, right? You can get us all on the same page for 20 minutes, and then suddenly one of us sees a squirrel and just all heck breaks loose. So just remember, step by step by step, this is the world's longest marathon. And some days you are going to run your best little piece of that marathon ever. And other days you're gonna be like, I'm gonna just sit here and wait for that kid with the juice who comes by, and then maybe I'll start running again. But when you get to that point, think of why you're there. Think of what you can change. Think of what you can relearn. Think of if it goes wrong, you'll be okay. Because when we talk about when things go wrong. So for all the brewers who are watching, my favorite question is to ask, how many brews have you dumped? Everyone's brewed something that just did not work. And normally you've got at least one that you're dumping per year. So why are you still brewers? You didn't give up. You went back, you took a look, you kind of figured out, oh, I carried the 4 incorrectly. We need to do the same thing with diversity initiatives. If it doesn't work out, you can't say, well, I tried, I'm done. You need to say, some of this worked, right? Let's go back and take a look at this. And what was the piece that we could have done better? What was the piece that worked? And what was the piece that we'll never talk about again? Because every time we give up, we push further back. And then we have this conversation all over again about how we need more diversity and how we need to be more inclusive and there needs to be equity. Don't be afraid to fail, because we do it every single day. And every time you think you failed, there is always that nugget where you say, oh, do you know what? That was the perfect piece to take away. So really, it's about taking time and being reflective. And I mean, it's quite often we just want to get it right and done and boom, that's it. But taking those 3 points and realizing that each takes time. It took you time to even establish the brewery and establish a name of some sort. So think of that as that you're marketing to an entirely new group of people. Marketing, not targeting. Don't use the word targeting. You're marketing to people, period. So think of that again. And then think of what happens when they come in. They come into a new building. It's shiny, it's new, it's exciting. How do I get you to come back? How do I get you to talk to your friends in a positive way about what you've experienced? And then when they work for you, how does that continue? How do you keep them growing? And if they leave, how is it that they take that nugget that they've learned and are able to continue that going? Because everyone wants a little bit of a legacy. You don't want someone leaving because it was horrible. You want them to leave because it's time for them to go and time for them to grow and to try something new. So with those 3 pieces, if you continuously go back to them, it'll always be evolving, because you'll realize that things will change. That first group of people who come in may influence you in ways that you never knew that they could influence you. And then once they're working there and making these other changes, I mean, we'll grow as both businesses and as people. So really let that sit and start thinking about how to do these things. And I think that for those who are always like, yeah, but that's a lot of work, I'll just put it this way. Do you like making money? I don't think anyone's going to say no. If you bring in more diversity and you show real inclusion, guess what? You make some money. Because for every new person that comes in and has a great experience, they'll tell their friends. Traditionally, yes, you have a bad experience, you tell 10 people. But how about you give them such a great experience and such a wonderful moment that instead of telling one person, they tell 10 people. And they truly become your brand ambassador and run around and talk about how great it was, even if it was just a lager. Because, oh, right, I forgot to tell everyone about the beer because I just had this great experience in this brewery where I was felt to be part of something bigger. That's what you want. And it will take time, but it's worth it. If we're serious about making changes and bringing in more people and making more room at this craft beer table that we call the industry, then you have to understand that it'll take some more time, it'll take some trips, but it'll be a fantastic thing that makes such an impact and makes such a change. And I think that when we start realizing and slowing down and saying, you know what, it's worth it, we'll start to see more and more of this happen over and over again. And think about it. Don't you want to be part of that right at the beginning, saying we've established this wonderful community that continuously grows, not just within our building, not just within the surrounding community, but in larger mass. And I think that is probably one of the most beautiful things that you could ever run with. So really, it's tough work and it's hard work, but you're already doing really hard work. You've made it this far into a pandemic that who knows when it ends. And knowing that you can make these changes and make more spaces and make safe spaces, get it to the point where we don't think about craft beer having a diversity problem. It sounds pretty good to me. I know it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be one of those things where it's cured in 10 years, but making changes year over year is going to be a big thing. It's going to be a big difference. And if you don't want to be part of that, then what's the point, right? So think about these things and think about who's in your area. So my homework for all of you, which is probably the easiest homework to start with, who's around your community? What do they look like? Who are they? Do you know them? It's amazing at how many places are smack dab in the community and they don't know anyone. So write that down. Just start mulling it over and saying, okay, who's around me? And when you finish that list, think of the people you can reach out to. And remember, you're not reaching out to them to sell them beer. You're reaching out to them to connect with them and to learn something from them and maybe teach them something, but that's not your aim. And once you start that, that's where you can get to. Those are the changes that you can make, because knowing the community at large will help you and your internal brewing community. Doesn't that sound beautiful? So yeah, let's make more room for everyone at the family craft beer table, because all we need to do is scooch over a little bit. I'll bring the potato salad. One of you can bring the soda. It's going to be fantastic. And that way, it's going to make some really good changes. Friends, thank you so much for this time. I'm seeing that some questions are popping up. So please, if you have other questions, throw them in. I'm going to start answering some of them, kind of going through. Yeah, this is always so wonderful. And I thank you again for spending time. So the first one I've got is question for BIPOC and LGBTQ plus folks who are already in the industry. What questions do you have for working with employers to better facilitate our diversity and inclusion? I think part of it is more dialogue. There's definitely got to be more talk and there's got to be more interaction. I am seeing starting to pop up are D&I committees or something under that name. And I think that right now people are really open to having them. If it is a small brewery, then it might not be possible. So then maybe it's you sit down for half hour every week and just have a conversation. A lot of places are also starting to pass around podcasts and articles and different pieces to like help facilitate those conversations, because a lot of breweries that are making these changes are starting to be very open about it, right? So when we made changes in the past, we just show you when it's done. As everyone knows, diversity and inclusion is not a thing that will be done. So sticking around for it and you can say, this brewery started doing this thing, like, why don't we look into some of this? And hopefully getting that opening and showing that someone else has done something. And be, also, if you're able to, and you have the emotional strength, be honest about your feeling about things. Sometimes it won't happen, but if you can, start that conversation and be honest with what you need. Uh, a lot of breweries have more so on third parties and word of mouth for their marketing, especially for budget reasons, which has led to the echo chamber. What would I recommend to those breweries to take better control of their messaging and marketing? A big piece is starting to highlight who works for you. And it's because, again, everyone becomes this like hidden behind the box. And, we don't talk about who's in there. Start hiding. This is our stuff and this is who we're proud of. And even if they're all white, doing and they are letting third parties take over a lot of it because they're afraid to show. Then if you are or only white company, you can show your staff. Please show your staff, they've been working really hard, but then have the staff talk about their favorite charity or favorite thing that they've just learned, or the favorite book by that new BIPOC author, or that that podcast. Like, show the connection and show that there's something that you're learning internally. And I think the easiest step to start with on social media is highlighting who works in your building, because that's just, it's so incredibly important. So let's see. Yeah, look at the work. I think it's going to be really great. And I think that some big changes are definitely coming. And I think with all of you and all these amazing comments, thank you. I think that it's, as someone says, change is critical in society as a whole. And I think that with beer, we forget about us being change makers and being able to do that. It's so important. Starting to see breweries that are even doing land acknowledgements and thinking about it and like, oh, great Google resource, which of course I don't off the top of my head, that will tell you what land you're on and give you the full acknowledgement. So let's see. So once we've looked around and seen who's around us, what's the best of them? It sounds silly, but do I walk up to people on the street and say hi? Yeah, maybe you do. I mean, like, yes, it's COVID, so it's probably not going to happen in the same ways. But with social media, you can do the equivalent of a walk up and say hi to someone. And I think that some of it, we have to think less hard about it. It's, have you made a friend by randomly running into them in a bar, like sitting with a stranger? Yeah. So sometimes you can do that. And I think that with the taking a look to see who's around you, what's the community center, what's the charity place, like take a look at those folks and say hi to them. So it's a virtual hi, but yes. So I've noticed throughout the industry that a lot of the time, one segment that you've touched on, 45 plus, are often left out. It's a big different than the other segments because everyone's been young, since craft beer is kind of seen as a young industry. Do I think there's merit that people of all ages want to feel young, regardless of their age, or do you think the 45 plus crowd would rather see more representation of themselves in your brand? Thank you for that question. I'm pretty immature at the best of times. I do have a mustache tattooed on my finger. So I will be 46 in 6 weeks, I think. So I think that we don't want to be like, so you're 45 plus. Here's a comfy chair. Here's like one beer. I think that, again, if we're talking about inclusion, it's not about highlighting. And in terms of, and I'm going to harp on social media because, again, pandemic, we're not interacting the ways we used to, but show someone who has gray hair, show someone who looks a little older. Like, it's just these little simple things, because again, going back to my Old Navy experience, I want to see myself reflected somehow. And it doesn't have to be that it's always a Black person. It can be someone who's older. It can be someone from any other background that looks older. So that put that in, and not and you should feel like you're 19, because I'm telling you, I do not feel like I'm 19. So I think that is a very important thing. So if still on chat, Marie has actually posted a link to land acknowledgements, and it is nativegov.org, and it's a guide to Indigenous land acknowledgement. So please go check it out. Do I have any podcast recommendations hosted of the BIPOC LGBTQ communities or women? Shameless plug, I just started a new podcast called Ren Likes to Talk. So there's that. I've brought backgrounds. Otherwise, things that are related to beer, current through film, because film is predominantly, if you want to do that, that is a really great parallel to kind of what we go through in beer. There are a bunch of other, I would say, drop me a line and I will put something together, because I'm terrible at that. But yeah, there's a bunch of podcasts that I'm currently listening to. So let me check. Sorry. Oh, diversity unfortunately gets politicized. Any tips for breweries that want to be progressive but also avoid being perceived as too political by the large and vocal conservative groups in our community? Yeah, so that is a big thing, because also, last year with Black Lives Matter, a lot of breweries were very scared to take a stance about it and said that, Black Lives Matter is a political group and I don't really want to make a political stance, to which personally I said, Black lives don't matter. So you don't want me to make it to Friday? Take it and make it human, because the issues that are coming up are human issues. I'm not asking you to tell me who your favorite politician is. I'm not asking you to tell me what your favorite movement within that is. But these movements right now for Indigenous rights and for Black Lives Matter, they're looking at people, and they're looking at people surviving and getting basic rights. As I said earlier, all lives cannot matter until Black lives matter. And that is a statement that I will probably make until my dying breath. And so it's hard to take a stance and say, we believe in this. But if you have a Black friend, go tell them that you think that Black Lives Matter is political. Tell me how well that goes. Tell me, that you go to your Indigenous friend and say, I don't care that you have a boil water advisory, while we are currently brewing X numbers of hectoliters and dumping half of it. So think of it that way. Think of who you know and how they are affected. And even if you don't personally know someone, how are the people in those communities affected? Because they're around you. So think of it that way. Wow, you guys are lots of questions. Thank you. I think that this is fantastic. And I think someone had said to include older communities posts on all social media platforms. Facebook. I am not a huge fan of Facebook, but my mother is. My mother is also a huge fan of craft beer. So yes, don't ignore all your platforms, even though you want to. Twitter is always a garbage fire. Facebook is Facebook. And Instagram is where most of us go. But if you want to talk to those older folks that are out there and are drinking someone else's craft beer, because they are drinking it, you got to be able to get to them. So think of it that way. Think of how you are able to reach to someone. And when you reach out to them using those platforms, don't be lazy about it. Don't just Instagram link into Facebook where they have to go and click it to get back, which also happens in Twitter, because you don't want it to be that you're just saying, well, I'm covering my platforms. You want to be able to engage on all levels, because that's how you would be able to do it. So think of that again, play with it a little bit. And if you have older people who are coming in right now, ask them what they would want to see. I mean, you're allowed to ask people what they would like, because we do it now. We do what's your favorite beer polls, and we do what's your favorite hop. What would you want to see from us? This is what we're doing. Hey, community. Hey, supporters. Hey, people out there. What do you want to learn about us? Because we want to learn about you also. So don't just think that you're in a silo and you're just putting stuff out there. You want to take stuff in, because you want to be able to grow as a brewery and as a person, right? Back to that origin story. Don't tell the origin of the building. Tell the origin of the people. Make it human, make it exciting, and make it something that people want to hear. Again, thank you, my friends. This has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you to BC Beer Conference for having me in to talk to all of you. I am incredibly honored to bring back salmon from Jalapeno. So I think this is going to be really great. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and let's be good to each other. Thank you so much.